nearby, let's go ahead and turn to Hebrews. And we're going to get really, really close to the finish line by finishing Hebrews. We still have a juggernaut in front of us, the book of Revelation, so that's still there. But I think we're going to jump from Hebrews to some of these teeny tiny books that are there at the very end, because those are really interesting. So let's look at Hebrews. And just as a quick refresher, so last week we were looking at the author, which you can really see a lot of scholars think of Hebrews more as a sermon or a homily more so than just a written letter, like we might think of one of Paul's letters written to the church in Rome or the church in Corinth, and you really get a feel for why some think that by looking at the passage in Hebrews in Hebrews 12, where you have or right before that, when you have these list of folks in chapter 11 with going from all the way from the beginnings of Genesis with Abel and going forward with Noah and with Enoch and all these figures like Moses, Abraham and Sarah. There's just plenty of folks that are considered to be great heroes of the faith, but the preacher / author here is just going person after person, story after story, highlighting the same thing in each story, in each person, and that is their capacity to trust God, even though they did not fully see the outcome, like Abraham and Sarah, leaving their mothers and fathers and having this promise that God was going to make them into a great nation, and through them God would bless all peoples of the earth. Like, that promise was just a promise for a long time, and yet they persisted and kept going and trusting. And then Moses with trusting God to go head to head, be God's mouthpiece to Pharaoh and lead them out into the wilderness. That all of these things are the kinds of characteristics that the preacher / author really wants to energize in the audience, right? That you may be tempted to sort of go off path here, or you may be starting to doubt that the way you thought about God or thought about Jesus or some of the promises that you've entertained, like you may be starting to think that, this isn't worth my time, my energy, don't know that this can hold any water, and begin to maybe stray from that. The author is trying to hold up all these examples, saying, stay firm, stay strong, trust like these people did. You are in a long line of spiritual ancestry where, what you're feeling and thinking is what so many people have thought and felt for generations and generations, but be like them and trust. And then the preacher really gets going. I mean, you can just feel it by saying, holding with your eyes fixed on the goal, on the prize at the head, continue to run the race. And since we are surrounded with all these clouds of witnesses, so it's like this kind of like homiletical crescendo that like gets to this point where all these stories that have been mentioned are described like this roaring crowd all cheering for you to run the race that they have, to take the trust and the faith to sort of see the prize ahead of them and keep running towards it with all of these people cheering them on, and their spiritual ancestors. And so it's quite a rousing sort of let's go preacher moment here. I even mentioned last week that if you ever witnessed a preacher that gets so into it, they got the towel nearby. I aspire to be that kind of preacher, like that preaches so just with their whole heart, mind, body, and soul that they need a towel. Just to like, sometimes maybe I'll just put a towel just to make me feel like I'm there, but dab my dry forehead. But the preacher's really going here. But again, it really fits into this theme that's there throughout. Stay firm, don't stray, stay on the path, follow Jesus. So, let's see, I believe we left off at the end of chapter, we got through chapter 12, verse 13, I believe. And this is where Jesus is sort of set as the final example So maybe let me just read kind of where we left off, the kind of climax of this moment here, a rhetorical moment that the author's giving, and then we'll pick up. So this is chapter 12, starting verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. So remember, so Jesus is like the ultimate example, like all those who have come before. He saw the cross ahead of him. Evidence on the ground seems to suggest that this whole mission and way of understanding God is a train wreck, but he still trusted, kept running the race, and he was then elevated, rewarded for that trust, even to the end. Verse 3, consider him who endured such hostility against himself from sinners, so that you may not grow weary or lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood, and you have forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as children. My children, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, or lose heart when you are punished by him. For the Lord disciplines those whom he loves, and chastises every child whom he accepts. Endure trials for the sake of discipline. God is treating you as children. For what child is there whom a parent does not discipline? If you do not have that discipline in which all children share, then you are illegitimate and not his children. Moreover, we had human parents to discipline us, and we respected them. Should we not be even more willing to be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share his holiness. Now, discipline always seems painful rather than pleasing at the time, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Okay. So let's stop there. This is a theme we did not really unpack last week. But rather than just sort of attribute some of the trials and hardships that they're facing to just, that's life, he frames it as discipline, as the disciplining of a heavenly parent, because this is what caring parents do. Just like humans discipline their children, so God disciplines us, and which should only reinforce that they are in fact children of God, not compromise their imagination. Are we really children of God? So what do you make of that? Why in the world do you think with this author, after going through that, run the race, keep your eyes fixed, surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, why just like, and this hardship you're facing, just imagine it as the discipline of a heavenly parent. Like, why that pivot? Why that decision, you think? Yeah? Because they are experiencing hard times, yeah? Interesting that rather just saying life is hard, is trying to make meaning of the hardships, so that they can imagine it in such a way that only reinforces their sense of identity as children of God. So it must be something's going on, as you say. There's hardships that are being experienced. He reminds them it hasn't gotten to the point of bloodshed, I'll mind you, yeah, but hardships nonetheless. So what are you going to say? Right, yeah. Yeah, so there's definitely that commonality, right? That, like any faith tradition that's trying to reframe hardships to reinforce their faith, that's certainly what is happening here. Can I just ask you, so this is, remember the different hats we put on? So you've got like the interpreter hat that's just sort of looking at the text to see like what's the author saying, right? That's just, without sort of saying whether it's good or bad, you're just trying to find out like what is being articulated here. Right? That's the one hat. Um, if you could put on kind of like theologian hat, where you're thinking, well, what do I imagine to be true about God? Do you find this compelling, or not at all, to imagine hardships in your own life, in our life, as discipline from a heavenly parent? Is that helpful to you, or does that like, I don't know if that sits right? Just out of curiosity. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So it doesn't, this doesn't, in other words, like when we're like got our theologian hats on and trying to think about like, how is this reflecting the character of God in our life? Like one of the ways we could frame this is that maybe it's not purely like we mess up and there's kind of a punishment, right, to kind of grab hold of us, but that there's something a little bit more robust, three-dimensional happening. An example I'm thinking about from my life is that one of the like worst forms of torture I can institute for my children, not as punishment, but just because there needs to be boundaries around these things, is like screen time, right? So like just to say Raymond, that you have, a certain amount of screen time that you can do this thing on it, and once we reach that time, like then we got to choose to do something else. Well, even though that he's looked me in the eyes and like said to me, repeated back to me the time that we have to like turn off, Xbox or turn off the iPad or whatever, it's just when that moment arrives, it's just like, what? Like, it's just like, who are you? Like you evil creature. Like how dare you come between me and my screen or whatever it is. I just need 5 more minutes. It's just whatever. And so, and in the moment of like, actually, no, following through with the boundary here, like this is the end of screen time, moving on to something else. It may feel retributive to him, like it may feel like he's being punished in some way. He's not done anything wrong, but this is sort of something that is, what we might say, in his best interest, right? I don't want him to be 24/7 on screens all the time, and to learn to play, even to learn to be bored, which is like the unforgivable sin of a parent, right? But it may feel to him as if it is like he's questioning my very character as a father. So, but there is something that's it's not retributive. It's not a punishment per se. It is a hardship, but it's meant to be formative in a good way. And I wonder if maybe what you're saying is like maybe this sort of disciplining of a heavenly parent can be something that's a bit more robust and three-dimensional. Like we might experience something as being hardships or being even It may even feel like punishment at times, but it's just those hardships actually have generative power for good. And that generative power, even experienced as a hardship, stems from the love of the heavenly parent. Doesn't call into question, the genuineness of that love. So maybe that's something. Can you think of something that you might frame in that kind of way now, like a hardship that we might experience that, if I frame it in this kind of way, that maybe it could be not all bad, but maybe it could be generative in terms of my own faith, or it can help form me in ways that are good. It can form me more in the likeness of Christ or whatever. Can you think of an example of like maybe a hardship that could be reframed in that kind of way? I think maybe an example that comes to my mind is, say you've got your wider family and things are not unfolding in the family dynamics maybe the way that you would like them to. Like if you could draw it up or wave a magic wand, it would go through a certain way. I'm thinking specifically about it even during the pandemic. Our extended family all had very different ideas about how to navigate this safely, what the implications were, when it was safe to get together and what kind of context, different ideas about masking, not masking, what kind of mask, there were just, what was the real cost there. Just brought whatever the fault lines were in family dynamics that were there, that kind of can bring those things to the surface. And there were times where it was just so hard to navigate that. It's very, very hard. And there are times where I felt just exasperated by the whole thing. I guess they just they're just going to be who they are, and I guess they don't care if we all get sick and die or whatever. I could get very exasperated with the whole situation, and do they not care that our kids, there's no vaccination for our kids, or do they not care that that I'm going to be in contact with immunosuppressant people and just pastoral work? There was just lots of things that could get my blood boiling, and if you let me, I could just but if there was a way to sort of slow down and breathe, which is something I do often, slow down and breathe. What I tell my kids, just to slow down. Do you ever do the box breathing, that inhale 10, exhale? Do you have to teach students this?
No, we have a box breathing thing above our copiers at school.
Oh, you do for the faculty? Yes.
That and a figurine of whoever's the patron saint of lost causes.
Well, now I'm desperate to know who is the patron saint of lost causes.
We had a former employee that just kind of became long-time volunteer. He was a very devout Catholic. If you were selling your house, you'd come bury some saint in your yards.
Oh, really?
Interesting fellow.
Fascinating.
Or chapel.
Yes, that's fantastic. Patron saint. I'm going to Google that later. The patron saint of lost causes. What?
One of the schools I go to, above the copier has a picture of Ryan Reynolds, great husband in Israel.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. See, y'all have great spaces. You just made a simple space that just has so much it conveys. I love it. What is it? St. Jude? St. Jude Thaddeus is the patron saint of lost causes. St. Jude Thaddeus? Is that St. Jude Thaddeus? Yes, very good. Very good. Yeah, I'm thinking of certain collegiate coaches I should have prayed to, or for to that patron saint of lost causes. But I think just doing the box breathing, like the thing I teach my kids is like the thing that I practice myself, like the inhale for 10 seconds, exhale 10 seconds, inhale 10 seconds. I mean, there's a tremendous physiological effect that happens if you do that for 2 minutes. I mean, it is an unbelievable reset that happens if you can do that for a whole 2 minutes. But I can remember specific times in the pandemic doing some breathing exercises to sort of reset, and then I can sort of imagine these family relationships a little bit differently. I can rediscover gratitude for those relationships. I can rediscover the good that is still there, even amidst the challenges. And I can begin to appreciate that, in some ways, this is helping us deal with stuff that's been there for a long time, but we've all ignored it, and now we are having to deal with it. And that maybe there is a generative thing that can happen for us as a family as we deal with it. So that's just like a very real world example. So if you just think of any kind of real challenges in your own life that can sort of get your blood boiling or can make you just feel exasperated or defeated or despair, or something that could just shake even the very core of your understanding of yourself or even of God, it seems like is happening here. The author is really trying to reframe those core shaking things, thing that's kind of a soil that something can grow out of. These hardships can be fertile soil for something beautiful to grow. And that part of the job of the parent, human parent, heavenly parent, is to try to make sure that the soil is cultivated, even if the experience of the cultivation of that soil doesn't feel so great. But to recognize that and look for the ways in which something good and beautiful can grow. And he gives this long list of examples, ending with Jesus, that out of the very difficult, tumultuous soil of the turbulence of Jesus' life and ministry grows this Messiah who's able to shake the foundation of the tomb, and resurrection springs out of the soil, new life. That seems to be the culminating example that's then interpreted here. So that then carries us into verse 14. Can someone just start reading chapter 12, starting in verse 14? All right, let's just pause there. Talk about somebody whose native tongue are the Hebrew Scriptures. I mean, it just you just can't help but just speak in these stories and references. I mean, it just pours out of them. There's a lot of threads you could pick up there, but let me just ask, is there anything there that just kind of like, that thread really jumped out at me, or that little wrinkle, or that word or idea really kind of like caught my attention? I believe this is a reference to Sinai, that no one, so that when Moses goes up on the mountain, there's only so many that can go, but then they have to stop at a certain place, and then only he can continue to go up. So no one can go up on the mountain because God has descended in the cloud and fire, and it is holy. Like it's become like the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle that's going to be built. Like you can't approach. Too holy, too consumed with the presence of God, and if you do, then you have made an awful transgression that has to be corrected. Yeah. But what's interesting is that this is a reference. It's there, like in verse 18. You have not come to something that can be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest and a sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that not another word be spoken to them, for they could not endure the order that was given. If even an animal touches the mountain, it shall be stoned to death. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, just talking about Jerusalem here, right? Not Sinai. And to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. So like you have this this real sense, like whatever there needed to, like whatever kind of like separation there needed to be between sort of the people and the mountain where God's presence had consumed it, right? There needed to be separation. There's this imagination that like that, well, like the curtain that was torn in the temple in the crucifixion, like that barrier is obliterated. It is like there is a communion with Christ and a communion with the Holy Spirit, where just like you all are the very stones that construct the Holy of Holies, right? Thinking of Ephesians, where where it talks about like a humanity being built together into a new and living temple. It's kind of like that imagination. You are in the very like bright, burning, hot center of the very presence of God. Like you don't have to have this very kind of like fear. Like you're in the midst of it. It's this new covenant that's forged with the blood of Christ. It is a kind of covenant that now just swings wide open the communion of God with people. And so it's using categories, stories, references to sort of kind of crack open a new way of understanding the communion with God, present reality. Yeah, kind of a rough interpretation. Yes. So, for a meal, I know. So I had the same reaction, like, yo, like Esau getting a bad rap here. Like, like, what did he do wrong, right? Yeah. No, it's a wonderful thing to elevate. So, you know, if you go back to the story in Genesis, right there, you know, Jacob is the one who ends up dressing up to, you know, with the skin to feel like the hairy arms of his brother Esau, right? And goes and they prepare a meal. Esau's out in the field, you know, to to basically go through the process of like creating a meal for his father to receive the blessing. And Jacob kind of gets put up to this by mama to, steal that blessing from dad, trick dad. And yet here in Hebrews, that interpretive framework really kind of throws Esau under the bus. So why does the author do that? It's a great question. I don't know. There's obviously some kind of either an interpretive tradition where Esau has, the imagination of Esau has evolved to help make sense of that story, or this particular author of Hebrews has his own framework for imagining Esau in that way. But I honestly don't know. I have not studied that to have a good answer for you. So, but it is very striking why Esau gets thrown under the bus. Yeah. But I think part of the import of that is like, don't be like Esau in this construction of the story, right? Don't sell your birthright for a meal. Like, don't walk away from this. Like, don't, like this is significant. Like, the blessing that is being given to you, the position, sort of the lineage of what is unfolding with God. Like, don't just walk away from that. And so that particular framing of Esau is used in continuation of this same argument. But yeah, poor Esau. I don't know what this author's beef is with Esau. Yeah. All right, should we keep going? All right, do you mind, where did we leave off? Verse 25? Yeah, go ahead. That's just that right there. That's quite a line. For indeed our God is a consuming fire. But the message is like, if you could just catch a glimpse of the magnitude of what is unfolding in this new covenant, right? You are inheriting this new reign of God that's been inaugurated in Jesus. Like, it's begun. The collision of kingdoms has like happened. We're at ground zero. This reign is starting to unfold in Christ, and you're there. You're a part of it. Don't walk away from it. It would be, as dumb as the Israelites walking away from Sinai to say, well, I'm heading back to Egypt. Things were better there, right? So he's just conveying over and over, don't walk away from this. Like, it's just, you can't even begin to just absorb the magnitude of what you are caught up in. Don't just throw that away. Don't walk away. Okay, could someone start reading in chapter 13, verse 1? It's the final chapter here. This is where the preacher lands the plane, as they say. Can I just pause there really quick? My papa, I'm sorry, I can't help it. My papa, this was like the one verse of the Bible that just like grabbed a hold of him and never let him go. And I remember, like, even when I was an undergrad and as a freshman studying religion and philosophy, I remember my papa going out to his home in Grayson and him pulling up and rolling down his window in his Crown Victoria, as he called it, a poor man's Cadillac. And he would roll down the window and, hand some money to this person on the corner there. And he would ask, Patrick, isn't there a verse in the Bible that says you need to help strangers because they might just be angels? And I was like, yeah, Yeah, I think I remember a verse like that, and I can remember later on, like that question would come up over and over. He would say, "Isn't there a verse in the Bible where it says that you ought to help out strangers because they could be angels?" You know, I just for whatever reason, like that just cemented in his brain, and so every stranger he encountered, especially someone who was really down on their luck, he always looked at them as maybe this is an angel. So I just think that's just I always think of him when I hear this verse. So okay, go ahead, keep going. Yeah, let's do it. Let's take it home. Get us to that benediction. Interesting. Seems like it could have ended there in verse 21, doesn't it? Yeah, it seems like that'd be a good place to end it. But then it's like, I appeal to you. It's like, oh, nope, we're not done. Kind of like when you watch the movie, The Return of the King, Lord of the Rings movies. It's just like it's my friends who know that I love Lord of the Rings movies, well, the books and also the movies. They always joke with me, movie was great. I loved it. Even the first 3 endings it had, it just kept going. It's kind of like Hebrews. But what's interesting in that final chapter there, in chapter 13, sometimes I've had this experience, sort of preaching that I've gotten swept away in a thought or something or a tangent, and I've got the 3 things I really wanted to communicate, and I'm like, I can glance down and see it's like, oh my gosh, I'm 15 minutes deep in this, and I've communicated half of the first point. It's almost just like it's just like there's a lot that's packed in right there at the end. It's just like, okay, all right, I want you to always share with one another. I want you to deal kindly with strangers. Be with the prisoners like you were one with them, and just on, and treat your leaders well, and don't look down with them. Don't govern the people in charge of your care with sign, and that'll be harmful for everybody, and just on and on. Just try to squeeze it all in there. Just like there's a lot of territory this person wanted to cover, and just kind of gets it all in at the end. So with that final exhortation and benediction, that concludes Hebrews. Any final thoughts or questions about Hebrews as we bring it to a close? All right, what's that?
Stand to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, gracious God, and believe in the better word,
Mm-hmm.
God and Abel.
Mm.
Abel would kill for anything. I think like Cain killed him. There wasn't like really a purpose of like a jealousy. So it just seems like a weird comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Sacrifice and Abel.
Yeah. Well, it's Abel's fresh on the mind, right? Because that's the first person mentioned in that litany of cloud of witnesses, right? Is Abel. But in the story, when Abel, Cain and Abel, these brothers, they're offering up sacrifices, right? And,
Abel's was more desirable.
Yes, Abel. Why? We're never given a reason, right? And Cain slaughters Abel, and this is the first murder, right, that takes place. And in the text, it talks about how the blood kind of like screams out from the soil, right? It's a blood spilling that the word that issues forth from it is terror. Like it is a complete distortion of everything God wants, right? And so it's trying to, like, I think, trying to mirror that same kind of dynamic, saying that the blood that's issued from Jesus is not screaming a distorted, like, everything we thought and hoped about Jesus, like it's all wrong and is unraveled here, or the blood of Jesus is not the grand defeat, but it's the blood that comes from Jesus screams out hope. It's a better word. It is blood that issues forth that is good, that is new life. It is new possibility. It is new reign. That's just how I'm interpreting it. So it's like using this analogous spilling of blood as being an agent of communication that has something to say. One that with intensity screams out, this is all wrong. And another that screams out, this is new creation. That's just how I'm the blood of the new covenant. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Well, be thinking part of the take home that I always take with me from Hebrews is just imagining certain figures. Like the author here, preacher, has all these biblical characters in mind, but I think of people that I knew that are part of that cloud of witnesses and what it is about them that I admire and are an inspiration, and I imagine them as a part of the cloud of witnesses. But the takeaway message is to hold firm, hold fast, continue to trust and run the race. Even with evidence on the ground doesn't seem to suggest you're heading in the right direction, hold fast. So, all right. Well, that's it for that. I'm thinking based on what we learned about the patron saint of lost causes, maybe our next book that we turn to, since we're turning to the short books, Jude. Yes, I'm thinking Jude. So let's go to Jude next week. Let's do it. All right.